Good day and welcome to Predators Proclivity, where we look at data from the season for the NHL Nashville Predators and make comments upon it. I am your host, Preston Proctor. And to start things off, the playoff watch update, a little maybe postseason update, maybe more correctly. Let's see, the Preds have now played 42 games. There are 40 games left. They've got 33 points, 60 additional needed to make 93 for a wild card spot. 92, 93, 94, somewhere in there is going to be the last wild card spot in the West, probably in the East as well. In the last 10, they are 4-5-1, so now more of a losing record, but they are 6-6-1 since the 8-game losing streak. And they only have 13 wins, so those 6 wins are about half of the wins they've gotten all season. So that's actually looking for the bright spot on the horizon. That's kind of it. They are playing better. So 6 wins since the 8-game losing streak. And because of that, now that we've got 12, 13 games since then, I'm actually going to just start looking at the stats, starting with the game in Dallas, the December 12th game, and kind of just to have a little bit better, more recent perspective on how the Preds are playing. I think that's going to be really interesting. I did see one stat in my notes. I wrote, "Wow." So we'll take a look at that. As far as 10-game streaks from, I think it was after the first 5-game losing streak, they did go 5-4-1 in a 10-game stretch from October 22nd to November 9th. So they do have some winning streaks in them. Definitely not playing up. Not gonna fool you by saying anything about that. But they definitely have better play in them, and they have shown some of it this season, not a lot. I decided to start looking, I call it transaction watch, more of a player watch. Not exactly sure what to call this. Noticed that they just called up, I think, Kiefer Bellows. And so I looked and I saw, they haven't called up left wing Kiefer Bellows this season before. And I noticed that he's an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. I said, oh, well, this is kind of interesting. At some point, the Preds are going to be looking at their younger players. I mean, I guess they're always looking at the younger players, and sometimes they bring them up. I mean, all teams do this. You bring up a guy and, you need to fill a spot because there's an injury or they're playing well in their minor leagues and you want to give them a look. I mean, maybe you call them up. They don't play in a game, but they get to practice with the team, that kind of thing. It's interesting because the unrestricted free agents, they're going to have to do something with at the end of the season, right? They're either going to have to negotiate a new contract or accept that they're going to sign with somebody else. As far as the guys that are on the regular squad, if you want to call it that, playing regularly, number 14 right wing Gustav Nyquist is the only one that will be an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. Just kind of thought, when they called up Bellows, and for some reason I wound up looking around and seeing that. So I thought I would start watching for that because there are potential implications. But maybe we can tell what the Preds are thinking about if they start calling up a lot of these guys. But the unrestricted free agents at the end of the year, Nyquist and Bellows, I've mentioned that. Center Anthony Angelo and goalie Matthew Murray, all of those are not a big hit. Those are all $775,000 are their salaries, their cap hit. Bellows, Angelo, and Murray. Nyquist, 3.185, $3 million, 185,000 is his cap hit. But those are all the unrestricted free agents. There is unrestricted free agent group 6, and I looked that up, but that is number 7 defenseman Mark Delgaizo, who also is playing a lot. So that's kind of an interesting situation since he would be an unrestricted free agent also at the end of the year and playing with the Preds. Also $775,000 for him. And then another one who has not been called up is defenseman Jake Livingstone. So, and then there are some restricted free agents. I don't think that's necessarily usually as big of a deal because those seem to be re-signed generally. But those are Evangelisa, Willsby, Andrage, who they also just called up. Another thing, they called up Bellows and Andrage. I guess they called Andrage up a few days ago, but I think for the last game. I don't think he's played yet, but and then there's a Frasca, Mutter, Prokop, and Krona are the 4 restricted free agents that haven't been called up. And so I didn't look up the salary of the restricted free agents. I guess at some point it might seem to be relevant, but for now, not so much. We'll see how this goes. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I just thought that was kind of interesting that a couple of the people that might be questionable re-signs for the Preds and whether or not they want to bring them up and give them some time on the ice to make them to improve their standing for being able to make trades and bring people in, potentially making the team better by bringing in somebody more experienced to try to solve some of the problems that the Preds have. They do have 10 picks total for this year, 2025's draft. They've got 3 first round, 2 second round. They've got 1 pick in each of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and then 2 in the 6th, none in the 7th. So 10 picks, 3 first and 2 second that they also might be able to leverage if they were trying to make changes to the team. So, between the unrestricted free agents and draft picks, it could be they could have some interesting leverage on being able to make changes. Whether or not they're changes that would affect the team this year or not is you do have to wait and see who they get. But anyway, so that's that's the beginning of the podcast. So that's kind of the playoff watch, the transaction watch, the where are the Preds where are the Preds' future? What does that look like? What does the postseason look like? Kind of look at. All right, so let's get to tonight's game. The Preds are playing the second game of a 5-game homestand. They're currently 0-1 on this homestand, having lost to Washington Saturday. They play Vegas tonight, and then they follow up with Chicago, Minnesota, and San Jose. None of the games are back-to-back, which is handy. There's Minnesota. So the tonight's game and the last 2, the 3 best teams in the league, all in a row, Winnipeg, Washington, and now Vegas. And then 2 games later, we get to play Minnesota, the 4th best team in the league. A tough stretch for the Preds. So, it's kind of hard to fault them for losing when they're playing such quality opponents. I prefer to see them win, but we're looking for signs of a streak coming up or signs that the Preds are going to play better. Losing to Winnipeg, losing to Washington is no reason to think that that's not going to that they're not going to turn things around. And Vegas tonight would be a good time to turn the the losing to the best teams in the league around, I'd also like to see them beat Minnesota, but who wouldn't, right? So tonight they're playing the Vegas Golden Knights. This is the first game of 3 versus Vegas, and the first of 2 in Nashville. At the end of March, they'll be back here in Nashville, and then mid-April, they'll be in Vegas. So they don't play, well, shoot, it's the middle of January. The middle of January, March is only 2 months away now. Wow, middle of January. How did we get there? Vegas is 29-11-3 overall, 11-5-3 on the road. So, maybe a better home team than road team. They are first in the Pacific with 61 points. They are 4 points ahead of Edmonton. They are number 1 in the league. They are tied at 61 points with both Washington and Winnipeg. Winnipeg has played 1 more game. This is the first game of 3 for Vegas on the road. Next, they will play Carolina and Chicago. That will be a back-to-back, so they'll play Carolina and Chicago on Friday and Saturday. They did just finish a 2-game homestand. They're 1-1. It was back-to-back over the weekend. They lost 1-2 against the Rangers, and they beat Minnesota 4-1. So that's what they did in their last 2 games, 1-2 against the Rangers and 4-1 against Minnesota. Now, Minnesota was the win, and it was the second game of the back-to-back. So that's, kind of came back and won against a tougher opponent on the back half of a back-to-back. So maybe they were looking past New York, in which case maybe they'll look past Nashville and look at Carolina. That would be great. The win did end a 2-game losing streak. They had lost to the Islanders before that, 4-0. So they can beat or lose to anybody apparently. So they had a 2-game losing streak. Prior to that, they were on a 3-game winning streak, which had a loss, and before that 6 wins. So they had in that 10-game span, they were 9-1 before the latest 3 games. So they are 7-3 in their last 10 games. Notable personnel changes. Jordan Gustafsson is on injured reserve non-roster, IRNR, injured reserve non-roster. So he's not listed as being on the team, which makes me wonder why I'm mentioning it. But Lucas Cormier, same thing. Injured reserve, non-roster. Both of those no-natable stats. Number 9 center Jack Eichel is out, but he is expected to be back for tonight's game. The same sort of situation that we had with Minnesota, where their top player was injured. Supposed to be back for the game, didn't make it and didn't matter. But same here, Jack Eichel, center Jack Eichel, he's first in assists with 43, first in points with 54, first in plus-minus at 25, fourth in time on ice with 20-55, which makes him first for all forwards, and he's first in shots with 127. So he is a pretty good player for them, and he's been out for a couple games. Number 10, center Nicholas Roy was activated from injured reserve. No notable stats. And I'm going to skip that one and come back to it. Number 49, center Ivan Barbashev has been activated from injured reserve. He's second in goals with 15, with 33 games played. I thought that was interesting because he's second in goals, but he hasn't played like 9 games. So I think that he had potentially be first in goals because the leader is 16. So you figure in 9 games, he probably would have scored at least 1. So yes, even though he's coming off injured reserve, he's been activated. Assume that means he's going to play tonight. And then A little bit of joy in my life. The minor league team mentioned right wing Jakob Demick was activated from the injured reserve non-roster list and assigned to their ECHL affiliate, the Tahoe Night Monsters. Tahoe Night Monsters. They got a really cool logo. That was fun. I had to keep myself from buying a whole bunch of their stuff. Wow, really fun logo. Who knew? Tahoe, right? Night Monsters. All right, people to watch for Vegas. As I said, number 9, center Jack Eichel, first in assists with 43, first in points with 54, first in plus minus at 25, fourth in time on ice at 20.55, which first for the forwards, and then first in shooting with 127 shots. Number 16, left wing Pavel Dorofeyev. I think I thought I could say that better, but first in goals with 16 and second in shots at 126. Number 49, center Ivan Barbashev, second in goals with 15, as is center number 21, center Brett Howden. And the scary thing about Barbashev and Howden is that they are also second and third in shooting percentages. So Barbashev, who just came back off injured reserve and is second in goal scoring, scores at a rate of 26%, 15 goals on 57 shots. And Howden, 20%, 15 goals on 73 shots. So I think those are really the two guys to look out for, number 49 and number 21. You've got defenseman Shea Theodore, second in assists, second in time on ice. And it's really spread out. I've got 8 people listed because just listing who's first and second in these stats. So they really spread things around. Mark Stone, right wing Mark Stone is second in points, 38, but I guess he's like third in goals and assists. Braid McNabb, second in plus minus, 23. And defenseman Alex Pietrangelo, number 7, first in time on ice. Mark Stone, second in points, also fourth in shooting percentage, 20%, 12 goals on 59 shots. So I think the really need to pay attention when 49, 21, or 61 are shooting the puck. That's could be a very dangerous situation. For the Nashville Predators, the Predators are now 13, 22, and 7, 8, 8, and 3 at home. They are 7th in the Central Division with 33 points, 3 points ahead of Chicago, who has played 2 more games. They are 10 points behind Utah. This is the second game of a 5-game homestand that they are 0-1, and they are 4-5-1 in their last 10. Notable personnel changes, kind of weird. I'm not sure. I look at different sites and I see different information, but it looks like Luke Evangelista is out, as is defenseman Adam Wilsby is on injured reserve, as so is defenseman Jeremy Lauzon on injured reserve, and right wing Cole Smith. So we've got 2 right wings, Evangelista and Smith, that are not with the team, and then 2 defensemen, Wilsby and Lauzon. I guess that's kind of been an on and off situation for those players. They seem to be on injured reserve and off in reserve. And as I mentioned earlier, the other transaction is that number 20, left wing Kiefer Bellows, was recalled from Milwaukee. He won't be wearing number 20 in the game because Justin Barron is number 20. So I'm not sure what number he will be wearing if he plays tonight. But he's also the unrestricted free agent in 2025, so it'll be interesting to get a good look at him. People to watch, Marcia Schultz, Forsberg, Yossi, O'Reilly, Stamkos, Blakenberg. Their positions still the same. Marcia Schultz leads in goals and points, and second in shots, was second in points. Forsberg, first in assists and first in points and first in shots. Yossi, second in assists. He's last in plus minus at minus 23 and first on time on ice in 25.06. O'Reilly, he and Stamkos are tied at second with 12 goals. O'Reilly is fourth in time on ice at 18.54, which says he's leading all forwards with time on ice, which was kind of a surprise to me. I guess he's supposed to be a really good face-off man, so maybe that's why he winds up on the ice a little bit more. But, interesting, he's third in shooting percentage. Now, not as good as the ones for Vegas, but 16%, 12 goals on 72 shots. Okay, so that's the players to watch for the Predators. Now, the stats at home. They are 8-8-3 at home. And as I mentioned, I wanted to start looking at the stats from December 12th because with the Preds, they had a couple of long losing streaks. If we're talking about how they're turning it around and what they're at, then that's the relevant. What they've been doing recently is the relevant things, right? So one thing that was amazing as far as the first goal goes, in general, it really hasn't looked like it was much of a determinant. But in the last 13 games, again, not enough to really be statistically relevant, they've won 6 games, and getting the first goal is the determining factor. They are 6-0-1 when they get the first goal in these games, and they're 0-6 when they don't. 3-0-1 at home, and 0-1 when 3-0-1 at home when they get the first goal, and 0-1 and 0 when they do not. So that statistic really jumped out at me today. So I'm really hoping the Preds can get that first goal tonight. That would be definitely the best thing there. And then they are 5-2-6 as far as winning by period. Winning the first period, they're 5-2-6. So I guess it's okay. Mostly ties. The second period, better than I would have thought. They are 6-4-3 in the second period and 4-7-2 in the third. Interesting. I really ought to go back and take a look at the third period, winning and losing the third period without the empty nets, but I don't do that. I haven't started doing that yet. At home, they are 4-0-1 during the stretch in the first period. So usually winning the first period. 2-1-2 in the second, and 2-2-1 in the third. So actually, their stats during the latest 13-game period, looking good. It actually looking good. Now, we can, can't feel that good because we have lost the last 2 games. But here's, the light on the horizon. And when we win, we're 3-0-0 in the first period. So, it's real. I think really looking at the stats has the stats and looking at the last 13 games, we're really going to see that the Preds have turned things around. Now, the question is still, can they get the points they need in order to make the playoffs, or are they just going to make the second half of the season just a lot of fun to watch? And it should be a lot of fun to watch. The question, it's going to be fun to watch. Whether or not they make the playoffs, I guess, is the thing of it is. And then during this stretch, the first period correlation when they win the first period, they're 3-2, 0-2 when they lose it, and 3-3 when they tie. So not really, looking at that and not really seeing much to as far as we can really tell that this is going to make a difference. The first goal, unfortunately, to those of you that are new to my podcast, one of the two driving factors on me starting to do this analysis was the announcer saying, "Oh, the first goal is so important. The first goal is so important." Excuse me. And I thought, well, that's a bunch of hooey. Turns out I was wrong, and I'm fine saying I'm wrong. It hasn't been a real good determinant this year, but last year, really strong, and looking strong right now in the way they're playing, and at home, correlating this stuff. When they win the first period at home, they're 3-1. Now that's good. I like that. They're 3-1. And so then the second period, the other thing that for me is a determinant is how well they play in the second period. And that was the other thing that, for those of you new to my podcast, the other thing that was that drove me to start taking a look at this data was that when I was watching games for the Preds last year, it seemed like the second period they played really poorly, and that thing I was right. That was my analysis showed that I was right about that, and so far this year it's looking like if they can win the second period, then they have an outstanding chance at winning the game. That did not happen against Winnipeg, but if they're going to give up all those goals, they gave up 3 goals in the first period, and they won the second period by scoring 1 goal. The exception to prove the rule, right? So, but now in these the last bunch of games, and if they win the second period, they're 5-1. And if they lose the second period, they're 0-4. If they tie it, they're 1-2. So winning the second period is a fairly good determinant. At home, they're 2-0 when they win the first period, 0-1 when they lose it, and 1-1 when they tie. So maybe at home they can tie the second period, but they've got to win another period. And then the third period, they're 4-0. When they win it, 1-6 when they lose it, and 1-1 when they tie. So then looking at that at home, they're 2-0 when they win it, 1-1 when they lose it, and 0-1 if they tie it. So I think the second period tie followed by a third period win would be fine. So a first period tie doesn't bother me. A first period win or loss doesn't really bother me. I'd rather have them win the period. You can always feel better about that. But the second period is the key period. And, why other teams are able to play better in the second period than the Preds, I'm not entirely sure. So, excuse me. So that's the result correlations to how they play in the periods. The winning goal, talking about when the winning goal is scored. Now this, I haven't looked at this. Let me pull up last season. Overall, the highest percentages were in the second and third, 37% and 33%. In this last scheme or last 13 games, 46% of the time the winning goal is being scored in the second period, which is twice as much as any other, 23% in the third. When the Preds win, 50% of the time it's in the second period, and when the Preds lose, 43% of the time it's in the second period. The Preds are evenly spaced on the other periods, and when they lose, it would be the third period is 29%. So most of the time, the winning goal is getting scored in the second period. Now, we look at home, which tonight's game is a home game. That changes a little bit because it's 0% for the second period. So at home, not so much. 40% in the third and 40% in overtime for the the winning goal to be scored. So primarily the third or overtime. The Preds evenly, but the first period is 20%. For the Preds winning, it's 33% for the first, third, and overtime. And for the opponents right now, it's the third and overtime. But we're not looking at a lot of games. I think the what is that? It's 5 and 3. 5 games. Right, so 5 games is not a whole lot to measure off of. 13 really isn't either, but the 13 games would indicate that the highest percentage is the second period for the winning goal to be scored. So I think that's pretty much it. Last season, the trend was for if the home team won, the winning goal would be scored in the second period. And if the visiting team won, the winning goal scored in the third period, more likely. So the Preds, when they won at home, 39% of the time it was a second period. 65% of the time it was a second period for the opponents. They never scored the winning goal in the first period, which was also really interesting. The Preds winning on the road, 42% of the time getting the winning goal in the third, and the opponents winning in Nashville, 44%. So that was the trend last season. Right now, in the last 13 games, it's the second period is what you can look for. Which takes us to scoring goals, and overall, in these last 13 games, it's looking pretty good. The Preds are keeping even with the opponents, both scoring 9 goals in the first period. The Preds outscoring the opponents 13-11 in the second, and then being outscored in the third 14-19. I would go and remove the empty nets from those. I'm going to have to do that manually because I did not quite get the my spreadsheet up to date, which is disappointing. And there have been quite a few, and so let's not worry about that today because I'm just going to be making some rough guesses. Quite a few empty net goals. Take another quick look. The Preds are being outscored by 5 in the third period, and it looks like it nets out to 0. The Preds have scored just as many empty net goals as the opponents have, so they're still being outscored in the third period. So that's you don't really want to see that. In general, the Preds are scoring 2.8 goals to the opponent's 3.1, and when they win, they're scoring 3 to the opponent's 2.6, and when they lose, 2.8 to 3.4. So they're getting outscored when they lose 22-27. When they lose, they're being outscored by 4 goals in the first. They are actually, when they lose, they actually have outscored the opponents 9-8 in the second, and 9-11, and being outscored 9-11 in the third. When they win, outscoring the opponents 5-1 in the first, 4-3 in the second, but being outscored 5-8 in the third. Again, I'd really would like to be able to take those empty nets out. But somehow I've got negative numbers in my graph, and that's just not acceptable. Anyway, so that's the goal scoring. And special teams, we covered that the other day. Nothing nothing new with that. I did, let's see, looking at the losses, if they get outscored in the special team circumstances, which as I said, is the, when they're playing and not at the five, not playing 5-on-5, right? So if they're 6-on-5 or 4-on-4, 4-on-3, whatever, and then this, I also track what I call the just after goals, which is if they are in a power play situation and they don't score during the power play, but they score within, say a minute of that power play, then that's a power play just after goal, because you could get the momentum from the power play, and the minute might be a little bit much, but but that momentum does carry forward. Or the other side of that is if you were shorthanded and just after in that Washington game, they did get a penalty. I think it was the second period. I think it was the first period. They played well. I'm not sure Washington played well on their power play. I'm not exactly sure. They did some really weird things in their zone on the power play. One guy just flat out passed it to a Predators player. I mean, stick to stick. It wasn't like the Predators player wasn't moving. It was bizarre. But they after the penalty kill was over, the Preds were on fire in the Washington zone, and so had a lot of positive momentum going. Did not score, which is unfortunate. But in general, that's. But if they had, and they did within a minute, that would have been a just after shorthanded goal. And again, indicating the special team situation and giving them credit for that. But in what I've seen is that if in the Preds losses, the other team is scoring more special teams type goals. And just looking this up, I did mention it the other day and thought, well, what if I do take out the empty net situations? And looking at it here, there are a lot more situations where there was a tie, but not a negative. It'd be easier if I built a table that actually showed me those numbers. But there is this one game, I guess, against Colorado. The Preds would have had one goal in the special team situation to Colorado's 0, and they lost the game. But in general, I guess that's the exception that proves the rule. If the other team scores more special teams goals, then the Preds lose. And then looking back to the Preds and the empty net goals, none of those change the dynamic. One game would go from the Preds having an advantage to being 0, to being a tie. But in no case did the Preds win the game where the other team had more special teams goals. So, and that's overall, and that's not just in the last 13 games. So that's the trend there on special teams. It's definitely a good thing if the Preds manage to not, I guess it'd be better not to have the special team, the other team get all the special team goals, but at least tie them. Don't let them have an advantage. All right, so that's your Nashville Predators. And now for tonight's matchups. Okay, so we are playing the Vegas Golden Knights. First time we play them this year. Last year, the Preds were 2-1 against Vegas, so that's good. They played the first two at Vegas, and so the third game was in Nashville. The only loss was the first game. Nashville lost that game 1-4. When they won 5-3 and 5-4 in overtime. So 5 goals. 5 goals is pretty good. I know I've seen games where teams have lost when scoring 5 goals, but I think in general, 5 goals and you'll win. But that was the case last year. It was the first 1-4, but I don't think that's true. I think in the in the game that the Preds won in overtime, they had to score 3 goals in the third period to force the overtime. So it really came back there. Of those 10 periods, so 3 games, 1 went to overtime, so there were 10 periods. There was only 1 period that was tied. Of those 10, it was the second period of the third game. And so, like I said, they tied the second period, and then in the third period, the Preds scored 3 to force the overtime. Preds got the first goal in only the second game, so they did not get the first goal in the first and third. And that was the only game, the second game, where they got the first goal. Was the only one in which they actually scored in the first period. So that was an interesting stat, or a stat. It was a fact, notice. I don't know, whatever it was. But so the Preds were not. They only scored 1 of the 3 games in the first period, and won 2 of them. 2 of the 3. So, they seem to be playing Vegas pretty well last year. Hopefully that trend continues. As far as how they match up, on the power play, Vegas is 6th in the league at 25%, 26 goals on 101 opportunities. And then their penalty kill is 22nd in the league, 77%. 20 goals on 90 opportunities. So, in general, it just looks like they are not a lot of penalties when Vegas is playing. In number of power plays, Vegas is 31st in the league. And then shorthanded, they're also 31st. So they're not one of the I didn't notice who was 32nd in those two, but totally not a lot of penalties when Vegas is playing for whatever reason. Kind of interesting that's the circumstance. Nashville, on the other hand, is 19th in power plays, so in the bottom half of power plays, and then shorthanded 11th. So a little above average in being shorthanded and below average on power plays. Nashville is 20th in the league on the power play at 19.8%, 24 goals scored on 121 opportunities. So Nashville has almost scored as many goals on the power play as Vegas. Vegas has scored 26 to Nashville's 24. It's just Nashville has had 20 more opportunities. And then on the penalty kill, Nashville is 4th. After spending most of the year at first, but 4th, that's still pretty good, at 83%, 21 goals on 127 opportunities. So again, Vegas has had almost as many goals scored against them, 20, as Nashville, 21, but in 37 less opportunities. So that's not good for Vegas. I guess those few times that they actually go shorthanded, it is problematic for them, and it's definitely with regards to the rest of the league. So if the Preds manage to go on the power play tonight, hopefully they'll be able to turn their power play fortunes around and score. That would be awesome. Number of goals scored, Vegas has scored 147 goals this year to having 113 scored against them. When they're scoring the goals, they score 42 in the first, 40 in the second, 63 goals in the third, 10 of those being empty net goals. So that's still 53 goals in the third period, which is still a lot. But 63 goals ties them for third, ties them for first in the league in scoring in the third period. I guess I should have looked up to see, what period. I don't know if the NHL tracks that stat or not, but when the winning goal is scored, 63 goals scored. Scoring against, they'll give up 36 in the first, 43 in the second, and 32 in the third with 4 empty nets, so 28. So the third period, they give up a lot less than they are scoring. But yeah, 63 goals in the third period, first in the league, tied at first in the league. As far as the NHL Edge information, Vegas skating distance is less. So again, I think that's the trend that I've started to see from playing the better teams. The better teams don't skate as far. For whatever reason that is, they are better in goals and shooting percentage. They're actually shots on goal. Interesting. Maybe I need to rethink this stat too. The Preds are below 50% on shots on goal in the league, and I don't know if that's new. It seemed like for the longest time the Preds had more shots on goal than other teams, but it does not look to be the case against Vegas. Vegas has scored more. As far as where they're scoring, above average, they're scoring from the right and left middle of the ice. So not on top of the goaltender, not back at the point, but in the middle, right and left. They're as far as their time in the offensive zone, neutral and defensive. Again, just like Washington the other night, they spend less time in the offensive zone than the Preds. Less time in the neutral zone and more time in the defensive zone. To what end, I'm not sure. They're obviously winning. So that's another thing that I will have to think about, that maybe I have the wrong idea when it comes to how to assess a lot of time in the neutral zone, offensive zone. Then again, that's just total. So that if you pull the goaltender, it's usually only for a couple of minutes. So I don't know. I guess I'll have to spend a little bit more time thinking about that. As far as momentum goes, coming in tonight's game, Vegas, they won their last game against Minnesota. After winning 2, they won their last game after losing 2. I don't think that's not right. I think I just got this wrong. No, they did lose 2. Yes, after losing 2. Didn't update. They won their last game after losing 2 to the Islanders and the Rangers. And so then, of course, the Rangers and Wild games were back-to-back. So they lost the game against the Rangers, and then they won against the Wild. So they won the back half of that. But they did lose to the Islanders on Thursday and then the Rangers on Saturday. Only once this season have they not won at least 2 in a row. They beat Winnipeg earlier this season. Then they lost to Utah on the very next night. Prior to beating Winnipeg, they had lost to Colorado in a shootout. That's the only time this season they've only won one game in a row. Hopefully after tonight, we'll be able to say it was twice. As far as Nashville is on a 2-game losing streak, Winnipeg and Washington. Yeah, so Winnipeg, Washington, and now Vegas. So the top 3 teams in the league all in a row. I guess at least they were not back-to-back, but that's tough sledding for anybody in the league. And so that's the momentum. Nashville on a losing streak versus Vegas, who's won one. As far as the goaltenders go, Vegas, their 2 goaltenders. The first, Adin Hill. He's 18-7-2, gets about 60% of the starts, with Ilya Samsonov 11-4-1, getting the rest. Hill was in goal last year in the second game, which was a Nashville victory. 2 different goaltenders in the other 2 games, Thompson and Patera, were in the other ones. We faced Thompson in our last matchup, and so we don't have to worry about him being in goal for us to lose to. But so Hill was in goal. The last 9 games, Hill and Samsonov have been alternating starts, and since Hill played in the last game, it should be Samsonov tonight. As far as Nashville goes, Saros is now playing roughly about 3 games for Annunin's 1. Saros has started the last 2, so I would expect Saros in goal tonight. After tonight, we play Chicago, so most likely Annunin in goal against Chicago. Then we get to play Minnesota. 4 out of 5 games playing the top teams in the league. It's just a tough stretch of games right now. But hopefully the Preds will get it together. Last year, Saros was in goal for the first and third games against Vegas. The first game was a loss, and the third was a win. Lankinen was in goal for the other one. And then as far as Annunin goes, he did not face Vegas last year when he played for Colorado. Georgiev was in goal for all 3 games. So that's your goaltenders, Saros and Samsonov. There's no P. I keep wanting to say Samson. Samsonov. All right. So that's your matchups. Again, tonight's game in Nashville playing the Vegas Golden Knights. Players to watch for: number 9, Jack Eichel. But maybe more important than that would be to pay attention when Ivan Barbashev, number 49, and Brett Howen are taking shots. I guess Mark Stone's also 4th. So, it's the way you can watch 6 people. I have trouble remembering 3 numbers. So if I were a betting man, I would worry about number 9. He's going to shoot a lot, but he's not going to score that much. But when he takes a shot, watch out if 49 or 21 are on the ice because they might get the follow-up. So 9, 49, 21 would be the order. I guess Dorofeyev would be the other one to worry about. Okay, so it's 4. 9, 16, 21, and 49. 9, 16, 21, and 49. The numbers to watch for as far as the forwards goes. So that's your Vegas Golden Knights worry list. Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. I am Preston Proctor, and you've been listening to Predators Proclivity.